I'm Alan Weiss, and this is The Writing on the Wall. Welcome back to Writing on the Wall. This episode's called Disappearance. Some things began disappearing before the pandemic. They were on their way, but the pandemic exacerbated the disappearance. Now, I had planned to do this for quite some time, but just this morning as we set up, I learned that WeWork, which was going to fill office space with people in cities, has filed for bankruptcy. They ain't coming back. And what I mean by that is all this office space that's been emptied will only partially be refilled. Most of it's going to disappear. Now, whether that's used for housing or amusements or entertainment or retail space, who knows? But we are not going to see all this office space in major cities reoccupied for business purposes. That's a disappearance. Another disappearance that was going on for quite a while, it's been exacerbated, would be movie theaters. Especially these mega complex movie theaters in strip malls and so forth, and in shopping centers. Are they going to be turned into comedy clubs or venues for birthday parties and bar mitzvahs? I don't know. I think we're going to see them disappear, maybe be knocked down and replaced with something else entirely. Broadcast TV is going, and I'm not sorry about that. It's really pitiful. In these days, the lack of creativity and innovation in broadcast TV is just amazing. And on broadcast TV, I watch occasional sporting events and the sort of pre-game shows, although now you can get most of that on streaming services, and I watch reruns of Law & Order. I think I have 120 of them recorded. I believe they did a total of 460 episodes or something like that. One of the best written, acted, directed shows in the history of television. I watch them over and over again, and I learn from them. That's how good they are. Broadcast TV is disappearing. ABC, TV, CBS, NBC, Fox, they're going. One of the local stations here, affiliates, is largely used for the retransmission of other things right now. So that's gone. And after they finally settle the actor strike and the writer strike, whatever other strike there is, there's not going to be a lot of jobs to go back to. In line with that, cable TV is going. It's too expensive, it's too confusing. Streaming is going to take over everything. You know, Netflix and so forth are producing their own independent, quite good programming, be it short-term or long-term, multi-series around, and I don't know, the 5th season of Suits. There are 8 of them. I'm going to soldier through. They're getting competitive, but it's interesting. What else is disappearing? Well, local pharmacies are disappearing. Now, you might say, oh, that's terrible. They're giving way to CVS and all these giants. Well, I'll tell you something. The world has changed, and local pharmacies are of no help if you're on the road. I went to San Francisco, you know. I take a couple of pills, blood pressure. I forgot to take my pills. I was going to be there for a week. I walked into a CVS. They communicated on their computer to my home CVS, and they gave me pills to see me through the rest of the trip right there. You can't beat that. And so things like local pharmacies are going. I wrote recently of my experiences with a tailor here who's wonderful, been here for 30, 40 years, the last of his kind. And he fixed a rip in one of my handmade jackets perfectly, so you couldn't even see it. As I watched him, I couldn't understand how he did it. He said, pay me what you think you should. Nobody's going to replace him. There will be no more local newspapers. Last year, 10,000 of them, that was 10,000, went out of business. And while people do love to see their kids' ball scores in there and like to see who made Eagle Scout, there's not enough advertising for them anymore. If auto advertising were to disappear tomorrow, you'd see 40,000 newspapers go out of business, including larger ones like the Providence Journal here, which is a shadow of its former self, which once won Pulitzer Prizes and is now about 10 pages thick and doesn't even have an editorial page every day. So newspapers are going under. There'll probably be 3 or 4 newspapers left in a few years, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and USA Today, and they'll print an edition for Phoenix or Tempe or Peoria or West Palm. Conventional armaments are going. If you look at the horrors in warfare today, if you look at Ukraine, they are giving Russian major ships, capital ships, problems with air and naval drones. And I think perhaps we'll be sending bullets and missiles instead of people to war more and more often. It won't be conventional trench warfare. It won't be people marching across fields to attack. It'll be cyber war. It'll be electronic war. And there'll be drones and there'll be robots and so forth. Warfare is changing. You can see it right now. Conventional schooling is going out the window. I have to tell you, primary and secondary education in this country is hundreds of years old. We warehouse kids. I've talked about this before. And now we can see it breaking down. We can see even higher education, to which people flock from all over the world to be here at our universities and colleges, having to change because tuition costs are absurd. Tuition costs have outraced the consumer price index by 66% over the past few years. And so building brick and mortar to house and clothe and feed and, by the way, educate students, that's going out. You can't afford it anymore. You can't afford to keep raising tuitions. And as it is, you know, Harvard University has, I think, a $60 billion endowment. Brown up here has $6 billion endowment. Columbia in New York owns 216 pieces of property, which are tax-free and which the city is fighting about, as they should. But add to this perfect storm remote learning. Remote learning didn't work in high school. Kids lost 2 years over the pandemic. What a disaster. But it does work at the collegiate level. And so we're going to see conventional higher education change and hopefully conventional primary and secondary education change. Personal care physicians are going to go. Sorry to tell you, they're judging them now, you know, in these mega health operations by how much time they spend with the patient, how many questions they entertain and so forth and so on, like an assembly line. But I say they're going to go because fewer and fewer people want to be personal care physicians. It's a terribly difficult job. And now we have telehealth, and we can get referred right to specialists. And these involve people around the world. If a specialist in an area happens to be in Tanzania or Europe somewhere, we can access them from the States and vice versa. Now, just to lighten the litany here, I'll tell you what's not going to disappear. Internal combustion engine cars are not going to disappear. There might be fewer of them proportionally. But, you know, California, which is a strange place to begin with, has outlawed sale of what they call ICE cars, internal combustion engine cars, I think by 2040 or 2050 or something. Yeah, well, what happens if somebody goes over to Nevada, buys a car and brings it back? What happens if somebody buys an ICE car from someone else who has one? They're not going to disappear, and there'll be, I think, a premium on servicing them. I've got 4 of them in my garage here, and 3 of them have 12-cylinder dual turbocharged engines. Say that 3 times quick. 12-cylinder dual turbocharged engines. And I think they're going to be worth a lot someday. I'm not getting rid of them anytime soon. We'll see what happens. Global travel won't disappear. Business travel will, but if you've traveled at all lately, you see planes full of tourists. They're going all over the place, all over the country, all over the world. People have money they didn't spend during the pandemic. And now instead of saying, we'll get to that someday, they're saying, we better do it now before things get worse. The pet industry is going to boom. You want to invest some money? Invest it in the pet industry. I'm trying to get my dogs to invest. I can't afford it anymore. And unfortunately, I'll tell you what else won't disappear before I end. And that's homelessness, because we're pathetic at dealing with it. Here in Rhode Island, which has 1 million people, I've learned there are fewer than 500 people who are considered homeless. Fewer than 500. And we can't accommodate them. You know why? It's not that we don't know how. We don't have the political will. And unfortunately, political will has disappeared. I'll see you next time.